Greetings YouTubers, Rymante here with the return of the 5-year-old PC test, where we'll be covering the recently released Resident Evil 6 benchmark. If you want to try this benchmark out yourself, it's available as a free download from Geforce.com. A link to it is provided in the description. Before we get to that though, there's a couple of things I'd like to mention. First, I recently hit 500 subscribers, and while that may not seem like much in the grand scheme of things, I never thought that many people would be entertained enough by my content that they would be compelled to subscribe. So I would like to extend a thank you to all of my subscribers and to my friends who helped me get this far. Seriously. Thank you all. The second thing I'd like to mention is that the recording setup for the 5-year-old PC test has changed a bit. I've now upgraded from the original Hop-Hog HD PVR to the HD PVR 2. This, coupled with the fact that the graphics card in the 5-year-old PC doesn't feature HD copy protection, means I can now record full 1080p footage from the 5-year-old PC with no slowdown whatsoever. Like the footage that's currently being shown on screen, for example. This is the first run of the benchmark that I did. A run at 1080p with all of the in-game graphics settings set as low as possible. I've left a reminder of the specifications of the 5-year-old PC in the description should you need a reminder. That frame rate doesn't look too promising though, does it? However, one thing to bear in mind is that this benchmark is odd. It is far more stressful than it needs to be, as there is never any situation in all of Resident Evil 6 where there is this many enemies on screen. So the final product will probably perform significantly better than this. That said, 1080p is probably still out of the question on this system if it's performing this badly on the absolute lowest settings. So let's move on to the 720p tests. We'll start from the lowest settings and work our way up. That pan out at the end of the first half of the benchmark tanks hard on practically any PC out there today, leading to the belief that it is highly CPU limited. The fact that modifying the graphics settings has no effect at all on the frame rate during this sequence lends further evidence to this theory. Everyone's favourite orange sock puppet, Mr. Sectus, decided to take this a step further. After removing all the zombies from the scene, his frame rate jumped up by an insane 72 frames per second. And also apparently introduced some weird visual artifacts. But ignore that, moving on. On my main PC, I gained about 5 FPS on average when I turned motion blur off. So I ran 2 medium settings tests, one with motion blur on and the other with it off. The difference wasn't quite as drastic as on my main PC, but it definitely has an impact. It really makes me wonder what is going on behind the scenes in RE6, because it doesn't look drastically better than Resident Evil 5, and yet it performs much worse. Let's get ourselves a nice bonus and reminisce with the Resident Evil 5 benchmark. This is the fixed benchmark running at 1080p, all high settings, but anti-aliasing is off. Talk about a world of difference, eh? I did record one more test with RE6 at slightly higher settings, but the result was pretty much exactly the same as the motion blur on test from earlier, so I didn't bother showing it here. So that actually concludes this episode of the 5-year-old PC test. Hopefully you've realised that the RE6 benchmark is a bit useless for checking how well you can run the final game, but as I mentioned earlier, there's a link in the description to download it yourself if you're curious. I don't know when the next test will be, but I will probably tackle the one sole request I've received for this series next time. But until then, folks, ta-ta for now.